Support comes from Gemma, architects, planners, and designers seeking to bring joy to their clients and communities. Details at gemastl.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio.
I'm Jonathan Ahl, in for Elaine Cha. When a murder is committed in the city of St. Louis, most of the time it doesn't get solved. That was the conclusion of Unsolved, an investigation by St. Louis Public Radio, APM Reports, and the Marshall Project. The investigation found that of the nearly 2,000 homicides committed in the past decade, detectives solved fewer than half. There are different factors behind the police difficulty solving violent crime, but it also highlighted the ways that families of these homicide victims, particularly the parents, have felt abandoned by police and by the process of justice itself. What is clear is that while these cases are unsolved, the victims of these crimes should not be forgotten. This month, our look at the impact of St. Louis's inability to solve killings and how that affects grieving parents and families of those homicide victims. I'm joined by Ivy Scott. She's an engagement reporter for the Marshall Project in St. Louis. Ivy, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And also by Erica Jones. Her daughter, Whitney Brown, was shot and killed in 2015 in an unsolved homicide in St. Louis. Erica, first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Ivy, let's start with you. So there's a new story this morning called A Life Sentence of Grief, The Hidden Toll of Unsolved Homicides in St. Louis, and it features Erica's story and other grieving parents. So your work is the latest piece in this larger investigation into the fact that St. Louis police simply don't solve many of the killings in the city, specifically about half. How did you get started with this program, and kind of what have you found in the big picture?
So I would say that for me, the biggest finding is just where the breakdown is in resources for families. Something that I heard again and again from families was the sense that when it was them that was grieving and when that grief was fresh, they didn't feel like they could talk to very many people about it. They weren't very sure where to turn. And so for me, this project was very much about, okay, like what can we do as an act of public service for these families? How can we use journalism to create tools that will provide resources to them, that will connect them to other people who might know what they've been going through, who might have advice or counseling for them, and really starting to get a sense of, okay, where is that breakdown? Where are those frustrations and those pain points? And can we use journalism to step in?
Erica, you've been very vocal on this issue for a decade, ever since your daughter was killed. What has this project meant to you in your grief journey, in your advocacy to see change, especially in the midst of such an unimaginable tragedy? What did you want to see out of this project, and what are you seeing?
First, I was honored that she would, want to get to know us as families in dealing with the loss of a child, or just the loss of a loved one, but more impactful, the loss of a child. It got me a chance to tell my story to other parents that might not even have hope, that don't have, an outlet or anyone to talk to, but just someone that wanted to know, how are you dealing? Are you okay? And where can we help you? And you don't have a lot. St. Louis does not have a lot of resources that embark on those different journeys, when it comes to a parent losing a child. It helped me put a lot of things in perspective because I'm raising my daughter's son. She left behind a son. I can't forget Devin Fletcher, where he left behind a 2-week-old daughter. So she doesn't even know who he even is unless they're showing photos and speaking of him. When it comes to the detectives, as far as they've dropped the ball on so many of us, so many. And if I had an opportunity to really get them to understand, is don't ever put yourself in these shoes, because you couldn't even begin to imagine. But the same way you go out and your job is to protect and serve, give us a little bit of hope. Give us a little bit of something. You guys don't even call. You don't check on us. You don't see how we doing. You don't even try to find out if it was children left. Nothing. I have not heard from them at all. And when I say nothing, nothing, period, ... Unless you somewhere in the security field or something like that, you'll get a response. But us regular people like me and you, we don't get no responses.
Ivy, you asked families what they wanted the police to understand. What were the main points that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Erica honestly put it really well, but I think that there is this, obviously, for police, like they have a lot of cases. It's not just one case that they're solving. Often it's 10 or even 20. And so I think it can be very easy for them to almost get sort of tunnel vision and just, trying to solve a little piece of this and a little piece of that. And I think it can be difficult for them to have almost that bedside manner that we expect from doctors and nurses, where in addition to thinking about the information itself, something they also need to be thinking about is how they communicate that information with families. And I think that that is really the missing piece, is that sense of, again, if it were me, if it were my child, my niece, my nephew, my cousin, my brother, how often would I want someone to reach out to me? What would I want them to say? How would I even want them to phrase those things? I mean, we had one parent say something that I found very profound that just had to do with the detective's body language. She was talking to him about the death of her son, and he was, leaning back in his chair, eyes roving around, and, she didn't know what he was thinking about, but it looked like he wasn't paying attention, and that really impacted her. And so I think it's those things that seem small, but actually have an enormous impact.
I hate to use an analogy because this is something that has no analogy, but when you lose a loved one in a hospital, the doctors come in and they tell you that they did everything that they could and they try to help, and then they say, and the grief counselor will be in 5 minutes, or they connect you with that resource. Is that the disconnect we're having in the justice system, that the police may tell you that what the doctor would tell you, but there is no, and here's the person that's going to help you with what's next?
My experience with the hospital staff was ugly.
Really?
I wouldn't know.
I'm sorry.
With the comparison with the police and them, it's both one and the same. I had a doctor walk in the room where I was. The grief counselors met them in there before he got in there. He was like, Ms. Jones, I just want to tell you, we worked on her. We did everything we could, and we couldn't save her. Looking at his face, you couldn't tell. I know they have a certain decorum that they have to follow, but there was no, I'm sorry for your loss. There was no, if I could have did other things, then I would have. No, nothing. After it was done, I pretty much just broke down and sprinted out of the room where they had me. And I had to go and face her siblings. And I promise you, it was at least 200 plus people that knew my children from me, along with knew his family that was in front of the hospital that had been killed that night. Mind you, it was 7 other killings before hers. Her and Devin was the last 2 to be killed that night of August 13th, the last 2. So when you look at police's actions and what they display, all I can do is ask, sit yourself over here where we are. Imagine if that was your mother, the person that gave birth to you. Imagine if it was your child. Would you not go to the ends of the earth to try and find out how, what, when, where, what was? We were doing our own investigation. We did our own. And it was so traumatizing to us. It took, just relentless in trying to get answers, things. I received a Facebook message that says, we're sorry it wasn't meant for her. Just
A Facebook message?
I had a Facebook message, the messenger that comes on.
Yeah.
I had someone to send me a message that said that we are sorry that it was not meant for her. Ask the person who she went to come see. And Whitney was just getting off of work, going to her friend's house. Didn't know what was going on, know anything. Didn't have the slightest clue. And I could have had 3 children out there that was murdered. Her sister held her while she was passing. And the last word she know is, Montrese, I love you. That's all she kept saying. Along with her 5-year-old son watching all of this take place.
Erica, you mentioned Devin Fletcher a moment ago.
Yes.
And he was killed in the same shooting.
Yes, he was.
What is it that you wish people remembered about them rather than them just being a statistic of a homicide that wasn't solved?
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Devin way long before this. Him and Whitney went to high school together. They were high school friends. He stood out because he would be definitely a young man that, I would consider, a son, or a family member or a little brother, because he was very respectful. He cared about his family. He was definitely elated, but him being a father, his family definitely loved on him. And you can tell by speaking to his brother how he spoke of him. And in our eyes, these are something we carried, we bore, we nurtured, we fed, we loved on, we taught different things to, we watched grow into the people that they are. So for you to take that away from us, you deprived of us of a lot. Mainly my grandson knowing his mother, being able to watch him just graduate from 8th grade. Now he's a sophomore in high school, watching him get his first job because now he works. He's in a awesome organization, Boys to Mentors, with the late DeJuan Tolan, started DT623. He's still in that program. He's been in there since he was 5. And it's 10 years later, he's 15. So when you do that, people don't understand the ramifications of the impact that when you take a child. It's different when a mother or a father passes away. But you took something that us as a woman carried from us, and we can't get that back. No matter how hard we pray, we ask God, why? We just want to know what drove you to pick up a gun that they use in the military. These are military weapons. Whitney wasn't shot with a handgun. My child was shot with an AR. The shot that killed her was the shot in her leg, not the one to her arm, to her chest. Devin was hit in the stomach. Those are weapons of military. Unless you're ready to join the military, why do you even have them? And we have the most lenient laws when it comes to guns. The most lenient. Why? You can't make me understand that. No, gun person that carry gun, that give out the gun laws and licenses. You can't give me a story to tell me this is why. I understand we have to protect ourselves. I'm not saying you can't do that. But what I'm saying is, why do our children who hasn't even graduated school, who hasn't even had a job as of yet, is carrying around ARs and AKs and semi-adjusted weapons, and you didn't, magnify them to fit? Why? For what? I'm lost. I'm at a loss of words on that.
Ivy, you wrote in your newest story that several families of homicide victims talk to you about what happens when no one is held accountable for a person's death, and that warps a sense of justice, complicates grief. What does that complication mean to the people that you talk to?
And I honestly, I think that Erica can probably speak to this much better than I can, but I will say, just sort of in the ensemble of everybody that I talked to, I think that when you lose somebody and it's expected, it is very different than losing somebody suddenly. You know, I talked to a traumatic grief psychologist. They call it complex trauma or complex grief sometimes. And losing somebody suddenly and losing somebody violently, it just does something different to your mind. It does something different to your body than losing somebody to a disease or to an illness. And don't get me wrong, those things are also incredibly painful and incredibly difficult to go through. But psychologically, it's not the same. And so you have this sense of unfinishedness, to use sort of a made-up word there, but this idea that something feels like it was missing, something feels like it was taken, and there was no chance to prepare for that. And I think especially when you add in that element of violence, it's quite shocking to the system. I mean, our minds and our bodies are designed to flee and to resist violence and pain and all of those things. And so I think to try and grapple with and wrestle with those ideas and the idea of that happening to somebody that you care about, it's incredibly difficult. And then I think the sort of other theme of the story is the idea that, again, trying to find resources, and not just any resources, but resources from people who have been there, people who have experienced it, people who really get it, so to speak, it is very difficult. And Erica mentioned this earlier, but this very specific niche of an individual who has lost a child to homicide, it's quite narrow. And even though, you know, in the city we have hundreds of people who fall into that category, there's not necessarily always resources geared towards that very specific population. You know, we have resources for survivors and we have resources for their families, and we have resources that sort of get at different elements of this. But I think that oftentimes families are sort of piecing together sort of a piecemeal network of resources from the things that do exist rather than having things that are tailored to them.
Part of this collaboration between St. Louis Public Radio and the Marshall Project is an event tomorrow night, an art installation called Remember Me. The work will feature original portraits by a local artist inspired by the years-long investigation. Want to mention that's tomorrow night. 5:30 to 8 at the Curiosity Building on Locust Street in St. Louis. The panel will begin at 6:30. There'll be a community conversation. We'll hear from you, Ivy, and some other folks as well. And Eric, I'd like to finish up with this kind of event, with the Remember Me event, with the guides that are putting out there. Do you believe that there could be some change and better information, or maybe even more so, if this kind of thing had happened a long time ago, would your grief journey have been a little bit easier?
I wouldn't say a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's not a bad word.
No, it's not.
I'm sorry.
You know, it's I rather you ask than not ask, and some people just majority of the time assume.
Sure.
And when I explain it to them, then they basically just understand, you know, the gist of everything. I don't think that when you're looking at how to handle the grief when it's happening or has happened, that you're basically looking for additional assistance right then and there. Majority of the time is still trying to understand the why, and basically where does the family intricate part in it, or if you're a person that don't have family, then you can turn and say, hey, you know, where's the support? So when Whitney passed, I had very limited family, but I was able to get some support.
This episode was produced by Danny Wissentowski.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.